Kicking off the list at number 10, I've got Donovan Mitchell. Now, some might see this as a step back considering last season he actually finished 5th in the MVP race after guiding the Cavaliers to their best regular season since LeBron James left. On the surface, this feels like a downgrade, but there's an important story behind it. During the regular season, Mitchell averaged 24 points per game while shooting 44% from the field, 37% from 3, and 82% from the line, all in just 31 minutes a night. Those numbers might look modest compared to some other MVP-level stars, but Cleveland leaned heavily into a balanced, team-first offensive style where Mitchell didn't have to dominate every possession. But once the playoffs rolled around, everything changed. Injuries hit, the Cavs' depth thinned, and suddenly Mitchell had to carry the offensive load again. He responded with an explosive 29.6 points per game, but the efficiency dipped, 33% from deep and 44% overall, highlighting both his brilliance and the limitations of an offense that becomes too Donovan-centric. Heading into next season, Cleveland faces a massive decision on how much they want Mitchell to shoulder. When we talk about Donovan Mitchell heading into next season, the big question isn't about whether he's a superstar. We know he is. The question is what version of Mitchell we're going to see. Will Cleveland let him play heavier minutes, with a bigger usage rate, and essentially hand him the keys like they did during the playoffs? Or will they return to that team-first style of play that made them so effective throughout the regular season? For me, I think the Cavaliers are going to go back to the balanced approach. And one massive reason for that is the growth we saw from Evan Mobley. Last season, Mobley quietly put up about 18.5 points per game, grabbed 9.3 rebounds, dished out 3.2 assists, and added an incredible 1.6 blocks per contest while shooting 60% from the floor. Those numbers are strong on paper, but they actually undersell just how valuable he was. He walked away with Defensive Player of the Year honors, and by the end of the season, plenty of analysts were already calling him the Cavs' best player. Because of that, even if Cleveland improves next year and maintains its status as one of the Eastern Conference favorites, I still expect Mitchell to slide down the MVP conversation. And that's not meant as disrespect. It's just that the more Mobley emerges, the less obvious it becomes that Mitchell is the unquestioned face of the franchise. His impact is still enormous, but from an individual award standpoint, he'll probably take a step back. Mitchell isn't likely to get worse. If anything, he'll continue to refine his game. But he is going to be asked to do less, simply because the Cavs roster is finally deep and talented enough to spread the responsibility around. That's why I have Donovan Mitchell kicking off this list at number 10. Sliding in at number 9, I've got Jalen Brunson of the New York Knicks. And unlike Mitchell, this one actually feels like a slight step upward compared to last year. Brunson finished tied for 10th in MVP voting, so placing him at 9 reflects the progress he's made. Brunson missed a notable chunk of time last season, finishing right on the 65-game threshold required for award eligibility. That alone capped his MVP ceiling. So, if he can stay healthier this time around, knock on wood, he'll naturally rise in voters' minds. And honestly, nothing about his game suggests he's slowing down. Brunson has become one of the smoothest mid-range scorers in the league. His pull-up jumper is dependable, his three-point shot is reliable, and his ability to close games makes him one of the most clutch finishers in basketball. During the regular season, he averaged 26 points per game with a 55% effective field goal rate, elite efficiency for a guard carrying that kind of load. And then when the playoffs came, he raised his level again, putting up 29.4 points per game. That's the kind of playoff riser every coach dreams of, and it's why his teammates trust him in the biggest moments. The MVP case for Brunson, however, runs into some context issues. I believe the Knicks will be better next season. They've got a fresh coach in Mike Brown, a deeper rotation, and a more versatile bench that should allow the offense to flow more naturally. That likely means Brunson's shot attempts dip slightly, from around 18.5 a night down to maybe 16 or so. On paper, that might look like a negative for his MVP chances. But in reality, it could help him. With more offensive threats around him, Brunson will get cleaner looks and more space to operate. His efficiency could stay just as high, or even improve. So Brunson's MVP case comes down to this: he's an elite regular season performer who thrives in the clutch. But the reason I don't have him ranked higher than number 9 is simple. His true peak still comes in the postseason. And since the MVP is a regular season award, I just don't see him cracking that top tier, no matter how dangerous he is night after night. Coming in at number 8, I've got Kevin Durant. Now, suiting up for his brand new team, the Houston Rockets, KD's MVP chances look a whole lot different than they did a year ago. Last season with the Phoenix Suns, Durant was essentially left out of the MVP conversation. And that wasn't because of his own play. Statistically, he was still elite. In fact, he averaged 26.6 points per game on a ridiculous 60% effective field goal percentage, a level of efficiency that very few players in NBA history have ever touched. The problem was Phoenix itself. The Suns simply weren't good enough as a team, and in this league, the MVP is never about just individual numbers. Team success has always been part of the equation. And if your squad is mediocre, no matter how great your personal production is, you're not winning the award. That's exactly what held Durant back last year. But this season feels different. Durant enters a situation in Houston where the Rockets were already the second seed in the Western Conference before his arrival. That's not just a playoff-caliber roster, that's a legitimate contender. Adding a player like KD gives them an immediate offensive identity. Last season, the Rockets had moments where they didn't seem to know who their go-to scorer was. Sometimes it looked like Jalen Green was supposed to carry the load, other times Alperen Sengun, and at moments, even Amen Thompson would get heavy usage. The scoring hierarchy was constantly shifting. Now with Kevin Durant in the fold, all of that uncertainty disappears. Everyone in Houston knows who the number one option is going to be. He gives them exactly what they were missing, a consistent, reliable shot creator who can close out tight games, score at all three levels, and settle an offense when possessions break down. KD is one of the best plug-and-play superstars the league has ever seen. It doesn't matter what system you run, where you slot him in, or who else you put on the floor, his game adapts seamlessly. Give him the ball, let him get to his two-dribble pull-up, and it's basically automatic. Now, I don't think Durant is actually going to win the MVP next season, which is why I've got him here at 8 rather than higher up on the list. He's still going to have to share touches with a young roster that has plenty of mouths to feed. But what I do believe is that Durant will force himself back into the conversation. If Houston lives up to its potential, they'll be elite defensively with their young core, and now with KD at the helm offensively, a 60-win season is absolutely on the table. And if the Rockets reach that level, there's no way the MVP voters will be able to completely ignore him. Even if his averages remain nearly identical to last year's, the winning context around him would be so much stronger. So no, I don't think Kevin Durant cracks the top 5 in MVP voting. But I do think he reestablishes himself as someone you have to bring up when discussing the award. More importantly, his presence instantly elevates the Houston Rockets into a legitimate championship threat. Now, sliding in at number 7, I've got Cade Cunningham of the Detroit Pistons. Last season was finally the first time Cade had a healthy stretch in his career. Through his first 3 years in the league, health had been his biggest roadblock, including that brutal 2023 season where he was limited to just 12 games. But last year, he suited up for 70 games, and it made all the difference. With better spacing around him and the chance to actually build rhythm and consistency, Cunningham showcased why Detroit took him first overall in the draft. Cade took a Pistons team that had been near the bottom of the standings for years and transformed them into a legitimate playoff contender. In fact, Detroit pulled off something historic. They became the first team in NBA history to ever triple their win total from the previous season. And make no mistake, Cade was the main reason why. Individually, he was brilliant. He averaged 26.1 points per game on 52% effective field goal shooting while also dishing out 9.1 assists. That blend of scoring and playmaking made him the unquestioned engine of the Pistons' offense. His poise in just his 4th season was remarkable, particularly in the clutch, where he looked like a seasoned veteran running the show. That maturity carried into the postseason too, where Detroit battled the New York Knicks in a surprisingly competitive first-round series. Cunningham's leadership and composure stood out, even in defeat. Cade ultimately finished 7th in MVP voting last year, and I think he'll be right back in that same range again. The Pistons didn't make a massive splash in free agency, but their young core continues to grow, and everything still revolves around Cade. Now, here's the catch. I don't think Detroit will be high enough in the standings to push Cade into the top 5 for MVP. Realistically, the Pistons would need to finish as a top 3 seed in the East for him to have that kind of shot. And given how little respect that conference sometimes gets compared to the West, he'd have to do something truly special. That said, his ceiling is enormous. If he has a season where he averages something like 30 points and 10 assists while keeping his efficiency high, he could absolutely crack into that upper tier of candidates. But for now, 7th feels like the right spot for him, a clear MVP-level player, but one still building up his team's overall resume. Now, coming in at number 6, I've got Victor Wembanyama. And yes, even though he'll only be entering his 3rd season, I already think he deserves to be ranked this high in the MVP race. Last year was a frustrating one for Wemby, as his season was cut short at just 46 games after doctors discovered blood clots in his right shoulder. That left him below the 65-game threshold required for award eligibility, so he couldn't qualify for any postseason honors. But if he had met that requirement, I genuinely believe he could have cracked the top 10 in MVP voting. His production was already that good. In just his 2nd season, Wembanyama posted 24.3 points, 11 rebounds, and a league-leading 3.8 blocks per game, all on 56% effective field goal shooting. Those are flat-out incredible numbers for a sophomore. More importantly, he wasn't just putting up stats, he was altering games. His defensive impact was so massive that he's already one of the most dominant two-way players in the league. I've said this before, but it's worth repeating. The Defensive Player of the Year award feels like it's Wembanyama's to lose for the foreseeable future. There may not be a single player who shapes the defensive side of the floor more than him for the next decade. Now, historically speaking, defense alone usually isn't enough to win MVP. The award has always skewed toward offensive dominance. But that's what makes Wemby different. He's already incredible on that end too. There's a very real scenario where his numbers take another leap forward next season. Imagine him raising his scoring from 24 to 27 points per game, improving his three-point shooting from 35% to around 38%, and continuing to rebound with the best big men in the league while still leading everyone in blocks. If he does that, he'll have a legitimate MVP case. The real obstacle for him is wins. Just like with Cade in Detroit, team success will determine how far his candidacy goes. For Wemby, I think the Spurs would need to finish at least as a 6th seed in the Western Conference for him to be taken seriously as a finalist. If they can't get there, the voters likely won't elevate him into that top tier no matter how great his individual stats are. But make no mistake, Victor Wembanyama is already here, already dominant, and already shaping the league. If the Spurs take a leap, don't be surprised if he takes home some serious MVP buzz next year. And as much as I believe in Victor Wembanyama's individual brilliance, I'm not sure the San Antonio Spurs are ready to take that massive leap just yet. That being said, things look very different for the roster heading into this season. The front office went out and added De'Aaron Fox, a guard who quietly nearly led the league in scoring just a couple of years ago. Finally, Wemby has a legitimate high-level running mate. The combination of those two could absolutely be enough to push San Antonio up the standings in a meaningful way. Last year, the Spurs were a disaster when Wembanyama was off the floor, posting a -8 net rating. But the second he stepped on, that number jumped to +2.3. Add Fox into that equation and suddenly you're looking at a potential +5 net rating team, which is typically the profile of a playoff squad. The big question, of course, is whether that kind of jump will be enough for Victor to capture the MVP award by season's end. For me, that's still very much up in the air. If the award were strictly about individual impact, I think Wemby would already be a lock for the top 5, maybe even the top 3. His two-way dominance is unlike anything we've seen since prime Tim Duncan or peak Kevin Garnett. But the reality is that the MVP has always been tied directly to team success. That's the only reason I still have him sitting just outside the top 5 here at number 6. Now, coming in at number 5, I've got Anthony Edwards. And honestly, it feels surreal to say this, but after just 5 seasons, Edwards has already established himself as a bona fide top 10 player in the world. At just 22 going on 23 years old, he's already led the Minnesota Timberwolves to back-to-back Western Conference Finals appearances. That's something only a handful of players in NBA history could even dream of doing at that age. The Michael Jordan comparisons might feel like a heavy burden, but Edwards has leaned into them rather than shying away. Whether or not he can ever reach that level is still to be determined, but what isn't debatable anymore is that Edwards is one of the league's best pure scorers. Last season, he averaged 27.6 points, 5.7 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and 1.2 steals per game on 55% effective field goal shooting, good enough to finish 7th in MVP voting. The Timberwolves season had its ups and downs early, but by the spring they were peaking. Edwards led them past the Lakers team powered by Luka Doncic and LeBron James in round 1, then toppled the Golden State Warriors in round 2 to punch another ticket to the Western Conference Finals. But it was there, against the Oklahoma City Thunder, that Edwards hit the first real crossroads of his career. Oklahoma City's defense was suffocating, quick, precise, and disciplined. They threw multiple looks at Edwards, sent pressure from every angle, and dared him to beat them as a passer rather than as a scorer. And in that moment, Edwards struggled. His reads weren't fast enough, the rotations closed down his driving lanes, and when he couldn't consistently create for others, his production nosedived. Minnesota's run ended in just 5 games. As humbling as it was, the experience was also necessary. Edwards learned exactly what the hole in his game is: playmaking. He's already an elite scorer. He can put up 28 points a night on strong efficiency without breaking a sweat. But if he can elevate his passing, if he can push his assists closer to 7 per game and truly bend defenses with more than just his scoring, then his MVP stock skyrockets. That's the difference between being a perennial all-star and becoming an MVP favorite. Minnesota's defense is already championship caliber with Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels, and their physical front line. What's holding them back is the offense, and all of it starts with Edwards. If he can evolve into a more complete offensive engine, then not only does Minnesota become a more legitimate contender, but Edwards himself becomes impossible to ignore in the MVP race. That's why I've got him at number 5, right on the cusp of that upper echelon, with the potential to jump higher if he makes those strides. Coming in at number 4, I've got Luka Doncic. And this honestly feels like the year where everything could finally come together for him to win the award. Last season, Luka was at the center of one of the wildest stories in league history. Out of nowhere, on a random Saturday night, he was traded from the Dallas Mavericks to the Los Angeles Lakers. The move shocked the entire basketball world. While the trade itself dominated headlines, Luka's time in LA was uneven. He missed roughly 3 months with injury, and when he finally returned, he wasn't in peak shape. Even still, a slightly out-of-shape Luka is better than nearly anyone else in the league. He averaged 28.2 points per game on 53% effective field goal shooting in purple and gold, numbers that most stars would dream of, but for Luka, fell below his ceiling. Now though, the narrative has flipped. Reports say Luka is in the best shape of his career this offseason, and if you asked me, a lot of that is driven by spite. Dallas publicly criticized him for his conditioning even after the trade, and Luka isn't the type to take that lightly. He's fiery, competitive, and he talks trash as much as anyone in the league. But most importantly, he's got the skills to back it up. That combination, motivation, talent, and attitude, makes him one of the most dangerous players alive. I honestly believe this could be the season Luka averages something absurd like a 30-point triple-double. And if he even gets close to that, he'll drag the Lakers up the standings almost single-handedly. Outside of LeBron James, who remains incredible, LA's roster is thinner than most top contenders. That means Luka's production will be front and center. If the Lakers climb near the top of the Western Conference with Luka leading the charge, it'll be nearly impossible to deny him the MVP. That's why if you're looking for a value pick for next year's award, Luka Doncic might be your best bet. Now, coming in at number 3, I've got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And to me, this one feels like the safest pick on the board. SGA is coming off one of the most legendary seasons we've seen in modern history. He didn't just win the MVP. He also won Finals MVP, captured the scoring title, and delivered an NBA championship to Oklahoma City. He led the second youngest team ever to a title, and he didn't just do it as a supporting piece. He was the centerpiece, the leader, and the best player on the floor night after night. That resume alone makes him an automatic top 3 MVP candidate heading into next season. And when you factor in that OKC is only going to keep improving with its young core of Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, and Josh Giddey, the case for Shai staying near the top of the conversation gets even stronger.